that now so that you never miss an episode. Hi, everyone. How are we feeling on this Tuesday afternoon? I'm feeling like this weather needs to leave again and go back to nice. But anyways, today with us we have Emma Jean. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm happy to be here. I'm excited for this conversation. How are you?
Other than the cold, I am fantastic. Actually, I had to quickly stop at the grocery store on my way home from work, um, because I forgot to buy a main ingredient to dinner tonight, which was tomato
Oh,
paste. So just this tiny little can. But without it, it really doesn't work. Um, and the lady in front, because the express checkout, the line was like so crazy long. I'm like, hey, I'm just gonna go in this regular checkout. There's only two people. Yeah, okay, they have a cart full, but there's only two people. So I'm standing in line. The lady goes, "Is that all you have?" I go, "Yeah." She goes, "You know what? Go ahead." I'm like,
aw,
"That's
that's
fantastic.
nice.
Thank you." She goes, "Yeah, you have to wait in line if that's all you have." And I was
That's
like
the
real
best.
prepared. I had my cash in my hand. I did wait, so she was, yeah. So
That's
I'm
always
having a
nice.
yeah having a really good day with that.
I'm
Um,
always missing one ingredient.
right.
As much as I try to plan meals and I'm not good at it, I am always missing one ingredient. And if I don't go get it right away, then all the ingredients will go bad and I won't make it and
Yes.
I'll order something and
So you get it. You understand the pain.
I sure do.
Yeah. So what else do you understand? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, my name is Emma Jean Rowin, and I am a mother in a blended family of five kids. Um, I am a new author. This is my first time writing a book. In the past, I've written essays and I wrote a little bit in college, but I actually have been a graphic designer for the past 25 years. And so my story starts in 2014 when I was grocery shopping with my kids, and I got a call that my estranged ex-husband had become an active shooter. And from there in the story, I'm forced to confront the truth of my past, how I got into the relationship, the way my husband changed from this really idyllic partner to a doomsday prepper and an abusive spouse, and my journey to try to save my kids from all of that. And it's really a story that I never really set out or intended to write. I think after I left this troubling marriage, I spent the next 15 years really, really focused on my kids, getting them through
Yes.
all of life's journey and trying to make sure that they were okay, trying to make sure that they were thriving
Mm-hmm.
despite what they had been through. And recently, when they all went off to college, I just had all of this space for myself. And I think I started to think about my stake in the story and my role and what I had been through. And that's where this book came from.
I love that. And I just finished the book, so the review has not been written yet because, haven't got that far. And I have to say, guys, when you do hear the review, it's going to be glowing. It's a glowing review. Um, so okay, before we dive deep in there, the who are you question, you answered it pretty good, pretty good. This is the trickiest question of the whole thing. But like, who are you now that your kids are off to college?
That's a good question because I've got about 5 weeks left at the career I've had this whole time.
Oh wow.
I think we're going to find out who I am.
I love that.
In part, I am a writer. In part, I am going to be the lady who organizes her spice cabinet once and for all. And my,
I'm still working on that.
my career has been pulling me away from my destiny to organize this entire home. So I'm going to start there,
I love
and
it.
then we're going to see. I'm a yogi. I love to do yoga. I
Oh,
do it
nice.
every day. I am first and foremost, I think I am somebody who connects with people.
Mhm.
I'm introverted, but I love to have deep friendships and really dive into what a person is made of. So I think I'm kind of that friend for my friends who is kind of the counselor, the unlicensed counselor and unpaid.
Mhm.
But I really enjoy that aspect of people and fostering that aspect of life, just getting to know people, understanding kind of what makes people tick, and how we all survive, life here on earth.
That's a good answer right there. I like that. Let me know how that whole organizing thing goes,
I
because
will.
it's always the bottom of the list. You want to do it, but it's always the bottom of the list.
Yes, yes, but I think it's going to be meditative for me. I have a feeling.
I think so. I really enjoy organizing. I don't like cleaning, but I like to organize stuff. So,
Yes, Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I'm not good at the cleaning stuff, but I like moving through the house. I think I probably have a little bit of undiagnosed ADHD if I had to guess. I like moving
Yeah.
through the house. I'm cleaning up this, and then, oh, now I'm going to organize the entire junk drawer. Now I'm cleaning out the entire garage.
Right.
I'm that lady, but it's a real
Yes.
meditative process. So these are the first days of my retirement will be like this. I don't know where it will
Mm.
lead me, but I'm going to let it go organically and see where we land.
I think that's important. Just let it see and
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you're retired, you just let it be. Let
Yeah.
it be. Let it be. Um. So let's get into this because, like I said, I read the book and I was like, oh my gosh, what? Because nobody sets out in a marriage to divorce. Nobody sets out in a marriage to be abused, and you certainly never tell what's going to happen in the future. So you guys met in college, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so tell us about that.
So I met Alec when I was in college, and it was a summer, and in summers at my university, you really got down to about 100 kids in the summer. Everybody went home, and it became sort of this melting pot of kids, right? Because we had the Greeks and the internationals, and I was sort of a an alternative kid. And
Okay.
my husband, who I was going to meet this summer, was in the Greek system, and we typically would not have crossed paths a whole lot, but we happened to because everybody was at the same party in the summer. And so I met him on a night with my roommates, and I was really charmed by him. He came on really strong. He was um, just very forward, very confident, outgoing, and acted very enamored of me, which is something I was very much attracted to at the time. I had
Mhm.
come from a family where the marriage was very much lukewarm, if not cold, for as long as I could remember. And so I knew I didn't want a marriage like my parents. I did not have any idea what model I was going to use to replace that with, and so I think having this intensity in this person to kind of grab my ankle when I walk past him, and he's seated on the stoop, and the first night saying, oh, this is the girl I'm going to marry, and just kind of being very much the opposite of what I had seen in my home, and that really, really drew me in.
Mhm. I think that's a really common theme when it comes to relationships is you kind of you want to go with something that you think is going to be better, right? So if you're raised in a home that had really best role models for a relationship, and I'm speaking from experience here too, guys.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, you go towards something that you're thinking, okay, this is gonna give me the thing I'm missing,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Um, yeah, and you don't always know what that thing is, but you feel it. You're like, this is what I'm missing somehow, and you're giving it to me in this moment. So I think I'm falling in love with you because you're giving me this thing that I don't know what it is.
Yes.
Um, but that often does lead us down some really paths. Again, speaking from experience. But eventually we can change, make better decisions later, learn and grow and then find better spouses down the line.
Yes.
um,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah. So, um, how long did you guys date for before you got married?
We dated, I want to say it was about 4.5 years before we got married. So quite a bit of time, really.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I had sold myself on the relationship though within the first 6 months, and maybe even earlier. I actually read something today. It was kind of a quote or something, from some therapy Instagram
Yeah.
that I follow or something, and it said something basically that if you were having an emotional void as you were growing up, that it's very common to latch onto relationships very quickly because we fill that void with a fantasy. And I saw
Yes.
that in all of my early dating, kind of someone meeting someone, and based on their looks and the first impression, I would very much latch on and believe, all right, I need this to work out. I need this to
Hmm.
fill this void. And I think I did that with him. So even though we dated for 4.5 years, I was pretty much sold very, very
Yeah.
quickly in those first months.
Right. And those first months, I mean, they're going well. You don't think anything's wrong. I remember reading how everyone seemed to like him. I'm like, wow, you guys are the perfect couple. And
Yes.
something that stood out to me as I was reading your book was the idea that if we looked perfect to the outside world, then everything was fine. Because
Hmm.
again, I think that's a really big lesson that is taught, unintentionally taught, I think, from the older generations to us and down, is that you don't talk about what's happening at home. Whether that's between a relationship, just you with your own mental health, whatever it is, you don't talk about things outside of these four walls with anybody else outside of these walls. We look perfect.
That's right.
And you explain that so perfectly in the book. I have to say it stood out to me because I was like, oh my gosh, I relate so hard to this right now. Um, but it's okay that we make mistakes, that we fall, that we grow as human beings. I just want everyone to know that. Um,
Absolutely.
so there was, what was that? The Coke can incident or something?
The Coke grenade. Yes. Yes. The Coke grenade.
Yeah, so I remember reading that, and I'll get you to talk about it a little bit, but this is during dating, right? You hadn't got
Yes.
married yet.
No,
So
this is
this
just
is one of those red
very,
flags.
yes, early
Yeah.
dating. So, even really in that first summer when we're spending every single night together. So we are getting close very quickly. But yes, we had a routine. Every night we'd go out. He would work during the day, and I was with my friend, and we would go out every night. And yes, so this would be within the first 3 months of dating.
Okay. So what happened with this Coke? I mean, I know, but
Um,
share.
so this was one of the first big red flags that I let slip by me. And I want to say first of all, that this is the 90s. We didn't talk about red flags. We didn't have this language. We didn't talk about narcissism. We didn't talk a lot about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't really, I don't think we were addressing things, this is not okay. This is okay back
Yeah.
then.
I think
So,
that's a good sorry.
no, you're
Um
fine.
that's such a good point. So now, I mean, there's this guy on TikTok. I think he's the most hilarious thing, and he comes running out with the giant red flag. Do you know
He's
who
my
I'm talking
favorite,
about?
Dustin Pointer. He is
There you
my
go.
favorite. I mean, if he makes a new post, I stop everything I'm doing and watch it because I think he really
It's
is
so good.
educating people, and it's coming from
Yes.
a a man. And I think some of
Yes.
that is really important. Not that, men can't be abused, but I think for women to see this nice guy identifying things of his own
Yes.
kind and saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
that's awful. That guy's doing that," or
Right.
"This is great behavior."
Yeah.
It's reinforcing. It's reinforcing for men and women.
Yeah. I love that you knew his name. I just remember the videos and the giant red flag. Hold up, hold up. I love his videos. Um, but I think it's important that we note that this is in the 90s. So we didn't have TikTok to show us red flags. You could not go on the internet to research something. This is before those things. You had to, if you wanted to know about mental health, narcissism, healthy relationships, anything, you had to go to the library and find that out. And who
Yes.
was doing that? Really? Who was doing that?
Nobody, or you had to ask a trusted friend or family member. And as we've already addressed, nobody from the 70s, none of our
Yes.
parents, none of my generation of aunts and uncles and parents, nobody was talking. Well, they would be born in the 50s, I guess, but
Yeah.
none of them were approachable for those kinds of things. We didn't
No.
talk about those things. So you had to rely on your friends. And when you're 21 years old, it's hit or miss whether your friends are giving good advice, right? So
And they're
this
coming from parents of the same generation
That's
too.
right. That's right. That is correct. And I think I probably tended to choose people who were like-minded to me, which meant maybe they were
Yeah,
missing sort of that core language,
for sure.
to talk about respect and things like that. So the night of the Coke grenade, we had been out to a party. It was myself and Alec, and then my friend Dee, who was every night, our kind of third wheel. She was friends with Alec. She was close to me, and we were having a great summer. And every night we would walk her home to her apartment and make sure she
Yeah.
got there safely before we would go on our way. Well,
A very sweet thing to do, right? You're
yes,
thinking, oh, this is so sweet.
yes, very chivalrous. And so I thought, oh, we had gone and we had stopped at this restaurant. On the way home, we got a Monster Burger, and Alec got this huge plastic full cup of Coke. And we're walking home, and Dee says to me, "Oh, I've got to tell you what the girls are calling Alec." And she tells me, and it's some funny name. Hi,
Yeah.
I can't remember, but anyway, she says, I've got to tell you what I'm calling him. And she says something to make fun of his name, Doltman instead of Holtman. And he he went blank. And it was like a switch had flipped. And he took that full cup of soda and threw it directly at her. It splashed all over her. It left a red sting mark on her abdomen because she was wearing a crop top and a skirt.
Nice.
And we were just both shocked. And, I apologized profusely. I tried to wipe it off of her with my hands. I
Yeah.
was shocked. I didn't understand what had happened and why he would do this. And she kind of said, it's okay. He's been drinking and don't worry about this, and walked
Kind
up
of
the
a
hill.
brush off, right?
Yes,
Oh, he's
kind
been
of a brush
drinking.
off.
We can say this behavior is due to that. It's not really who he is. We're just gonna brush
Yes.
this off.
Yes, brushed it off and very much wanted to let me off the hook, I think, because she was a kind friend and she
Yeah,
could see that I was upset.
for
Well,
sure.
she went up the hill to her apartment and I was upset. And it was another night. We had this thing where he would break up with me every time we disagreed with each other and
Mm-hmm.
over little things, which was another red flag. And so
Yes.
again, he had broken up with me in this evening. But it really was, looking back, the first big red flag. And I have
Mm-hmm.
read since then, people say that when an abuser punches, they punch near you before they punch you. And I think with verbal abuse or things of this
Yeah.
type, he was he was verbally abusing people around us. He would be
Mm-hmm.
lashing out at people around us, or maybe be rude to a waiter, or
Mm-hmm.
do some sort of just out of nowhere thing like the Coke grenade. And it was confusing to me, but it wasn't happening directly to me. I was
Yeah,
upset about it, but I didn't really, it was easier to dismiss, I think, because he
for
wasn't
sure.
doing it to me.
Yeah, and that's such a big tactic with these types of people in these relationships is they don't want you to be mad at them because they're not doing it to you, right? It's okay
Yes.
that they're doing it to other people because we still love you and I'm still giving you attention. And then the other big thing is, yeah, breaking up randomly. Oh, we're in a fight. Nah, because then it's this, and again, you explain it well in your book, but it's this, oh no, I'm the problem. You broke up with me.
Yes.
I need you back to fill this hole. What can I do to bring you back?
And that's really the way I was thinking at that time. And probably for the first, these decades of my life up until I left
Mhm.
and went through therapy, I really thought of things as like, if someone were to break up with me, that's a rejection of me. And I would
Yes.
almost need to overturn it.
Mhm.
And that's what I did with him. I would chase after him. I would show up where I knew he would be and get him to like me again. And it would sort of erase that feeling for me of rejection, because I took everything as a hit to my
Mhm.
ego. Whereas now, in the more healed version of myself, I know that if somebody treats me badly, that's a problem with them, and I know to set a boundary,
Mhm.
instead of kind of putting it into my narrative about myself, a negative narrative about
Yeah.
myself.
And that's so hard to do, but yay for therapy because
Yes,
I'm with you
yes.
there.
Oh,
Um, so as things progress, as we're going along, um, you decide to get married,
yes,
right? Which
yes.
is supposed to be this wonderful, amazing thing. And so it was, you said about 4-ish years you guys dated
Mm-hmm.
for before? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so how did it go in those early years of marriage? Because now, what's that? There's that song, you put a ring on it.
Yes,
So
yes,
now he's got you hooked forever.
yes.
Now how is that changing?
So I would say that those first few years were the best years that we had. We didn't have children in the mix yet, and so there weren't all those opportunities for him to kind of be tripped up by that complication, the complication of,
Mm-hmm.
of children. Our careers were on the rise. We were building a home.
And
Um,
he had a really good, lucrative career.
Yes, he was very, very intelligent. And in fact, in our college, he was smarter than everybody else who was around, in our group. And that led him to a really good career. And he rose in that career very quickly. He was just very good at it and very practiced
Mm-hmm.
at it and talented. And so he made a lot of money right off the bat. We were able to build a house. He was kind of making do on all these promises he had kind of whispered to me when we were young that were
Yeah.
so ideal and romantic. And it was a great time for us. He was, looking back on it now, being being married a second time, I understand from having a fully healthy marriage that there were problems even in our best days that I
Hmm.
didn't realize don't have to be a part of your daily life. Just some little red flags, a lot of lashing out over things, um, little things going wrong in the house or missing an exit on the interstate and yelling at me about it, things like that. But for the
Hmm.
most part, it was a pretty happy time. I would say we were very much in love, and I thought we were on the road on the way up. I thought we were going up,
Yeah.
up, up.
Yeah. I think, as you're saying, it's those little things, and those little things can definitely become internalized. Like we talked about, you start taking all those things and saying, "Oh, I'm the problem. I am stupid. I am this," because of these little things. And I've called my mom out on this. I've told my mom to go to therapy. Love her. I do. I love her, but she's had some very bad relationships in the past, and one of the things I think that has had a lasting effect were these little things, right? Like there was big blow ups with her ex-husband, but there was all these little things that now when she say she spills a glass of water,
Yes.
it's she berates herself that like she is just the worst person in the world because she spilled water, and I'm just like, "Mom, it's not a big deal. Like don't worry about it. Here's a towel." But it becomes ingrained in you, and if you don't
Yes.
work through it, it stays with you, right? And so I think it's so important to note that we can make changes. You are living proof. But
Yes.
those little things, they build up and they become part of your personality. They become, have you seen Inside Out too?
Oh, yes. Yes, I saw
And
it in the
and
movie.
and the little orb as all the little different memories. Yeah,
Yes.
that's the thing, right? All these little things, they come and they start, I'm a bad friend, I'm horrible, I'm stupid, right? And they form this identity that is not truth at all, but when you don't have something else to define yourself by, you take it.
That's right. It becomes part of your programming. And I think I already had a little bit of a blank slate in my programming because of what we're talking about growing up with,
Mhm.
in an era where we're or generation where we're not getting a lot of messages. So I had a little bit of a blank slate, but I also had just some internalized perceptions of myself that were
Mhm.
already bad. I think I was one of those people who was born sensitive, for lack of a better word. I'm
Mhm.
kind of an unarmored person. It makes me a really good friend. It makes me really loving to people and understanding of people. But towards myself, it sets me up to be hit hard by the messages of the world, and they're all around us, right? So if somebody
Yes.
were to give me a look, a teacher when I was young, I would fall apart. And that would
Mhm.
become part of I would hit me hard. It would become part of my programming. So if you've got somebody who is already giving themselves negative programming with the subtleties of the world, and then that person gets married to someone who is giving them a direct bad narrative about themselves. I am a sponge for that at this time in my life, or I was.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So how long were you married before your daughter is the first one?
Yes. I think we were married 2 years before she was born. So we weren't married very long before she was born. And that is when the changes really started to take place. I had quit my job
Mhm.
at Alex suggesting. So he had said, "Oh, don't you think it would be great if when the baby is born, you would quit your job?" Well, I loved my job and I loved my career, but there was a pull towards the idea of being able to focus on one thing because, as I
Yeah.
said before, I like that meditative state of not being pulled in all
Right.
these different directions.
And being a
Um,
mom is one of the best jobs ever. One of the hardest
yes,
jobs ever, and sometimes I hate it, but it's one
yes,
of the best, right? Especially when
yes.
they're little and you don't want to miss any of those, firsts.
That's right. That's right. And so I was really drawn towards that. And so I had decided by the time we had our daughter that I was going to, let go of my career as soon as I had the baby, and I did. And so I had put myself first and foremost, locked myself into one. I'm a new mother. And two, now I am financially dependent, right? And that's not to
Yes.
say that it's a bad idea to give up your career, but in my case, not knowing what was coming down the pipeline, these are the things that kind of got all set in place when I had my daughter. Is that now I'm
Yes.
attached to this person through co-parenting, and we also I am fully dependent on this person for my finances. And so
Yeah.
those were the two things in place when she was born.
Yeah. And I think that's one of a big reasons why women often don't leave is A, the kids, and B, they can't. How do they afford to go out on their own? And if they've given up a career, say they've been out of it for 5 years, 10 years, however long, right? It's hard to get back out there.
Yes.
And so it can be very difficult. You know in your head, I need to make this decision. I need to leave. But how do you, right? It's
Yes.
very, very tricky. Again, like you said, there's absolutely nothing wrong. I quit my job for a while to take care of our kid. She wasn't a newborn anymore, but so she has autism, my younger one, and she just needed a little more extra. But it was okay because we we had a good healthy relationship, right? So there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Do what's best for you, but that is a really big issue when it's an unhealthy relationship, when one person is dependent on the abuser.
Yes.
It's one more controlling thing for them.
Well, yes, because in my case, and in the case of a lot of mothers who were in my position, if you want to leave, first of all, where am I going to get the money to pay the
Yeah.
attorney, right? And also, he could then be in control of how we spent money on the children. Oh, and he would say to me, my kids were in a really expensive private school that they loved and where they had made all these friends at the time.
Yeah.
This is much later down the road, of course. He would say, well, I'm not going to pay that tuition anymore. Well, it's not a good day for me to turn my kids' lives upside down and tell them that we're moving out of their home, that they have to go to a new school, that they have to be ripped away from all of their friends. And so it really
Mm-hmm.
put me in a position where he could use the kids' discomfort, potential discomfort against me.
Yeah, exactly. They get these various strings that they can play with and pull, the kids, the finances, and you weren't really living close to family at this time.
Correct. We had moved a state away. And even though I would have visits from my mother or I could go visit her, there was no one living close. I didn't have a built-in babysitter.
Mm-hmm.
I had friends, but my friends were all working. We were all in our 20s, and I was in a bit of a bind is what I
Yeah,
was in. As soon as things started to go bad, I knew very quickly I am in a bind.
yeah. And I think it's really important for people listening that they can see that these things happen to others. I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is you're not alone in your situation. Others have experienced it. And that's again what abusers tend to do. They take you away from your support system so you are fully dependent on them.
Yes, and that's how I was. I was isolated. I was at home. I had friends, but it was very much controlled who I could see, what I could do, and so I didn't have a lot of confidants. I made one out of one of my friends. It had to be very secretive, but it was a very isolating time. And so I think my brain, at the first thought of, should I be getting out of this marriage, turned it off because it was going to open a can of worms that I had no idea how I was going to deal with financially, emotionally. I just felt really alone and pretty helpless.
Yeah. So as we kind of fast forward a little bit, I don't know how fast forward, but then you also had a son, and they're what, a couple years apart,
2 years apart,
2 years
yes.
apart, yeah. Um, so in this time frame somewhere, there obviously the abuse continued, but there I remember reading about one particular morning, and when I read that, I went, oh my gosh, whoa. Um, so when he wrapped his hands around you,
Yes, yes. Um,
was that the first physical time, or was that kind of, has that already passed?
that was the first physical time. The bulk of my relationship was emotional abuse and a lot of really horrific verbal abuse,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of coercive control. And I think that's another reason it took me so long because I'm not being abused. Abused back then was abuse. It was
Exactly. You
physical
were
abuse.
hit.
You were hit.
Yeah.
And so yes, this particular morning, I think I had used my voice and talked back to him. We were getting ready, my son had come in and he had been up every night getting out of his bed, and I was exhausted, and I think it was early in the morning, and Alec was sitting up reading, and next to me, and I was trying to, catch up on some sleep, and our son came in and he was, running a toy truck over our feet, and I was thinking, oh, maybe Alec will just get up with him this morning. And I said something to that effect, and I think he called me lazy, and I
Yep.
spoke back to him and said, dads can take care of their
Yep.
kids too. Maybe you're lazy. And yes, within an instant, his hands were wrapped around my neck. I couldn't breathe. I had never even thought of what it would feel like to not be able to breathe. It was really, really scary. It happened really, really fast. And then I kind of put a hand on him to kind of almost try to signal a more
Hmm.
level-headed part of him, and he let go and then went downstairs with our son. And that was the first time. Yes.
Yeah. Um, and sorry, I'm kind of backtracking for a hot second.
Sure.
At I want to say it was like the wedding shower or something when you finally went and met a whole bunch of his family,
Mm-hmm.
and his sister mentioned something about him being aggressive or something when he was younger. Did anything I wondered this as I was reading it. Did you ever find out like what he was like as a kid?
I never found out the full truth because his family, especially, was very much resistant to talking about things. The best
Mhm.
I got from her, I believe, was, oh, I had to move out and go live with my grandmother because he could be scary. And then through little pieces over time, what I got was that he would kind of berate her. He would kind of intimidate her. I don't know that he physically abused her. I mean, they're siblings, so
Yeah,
it's not
it's
out of
hard
the
to
realm
know.
of possibility. He definitely was making her feel threatened, and there wasn't a parent at home who could control him. And so
Mhm.
they said, okay, well, then let's just send her to go live with her grandmother. But I get the impression that it was verbal abuse. And later on, as adults, his sister several times kind of verbally abused, or he verbally abused her in front of me.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a sign to me that I think she was probably treated at home the way I was later treated in my marital home.
Probably. Probably. And his family just went, well, that's him. He's your
Yes,
problem now. Yeah.
yes, yes. We can't
Yeah.
control him. Nobody wanted to address it.
Yeah. Big problem. But I was wondering that when I was reading the book. Okay, let's get back to where we were.
Okay, okay.
um, so you go downstairs with your son, and obviously you have to soothe him from this episode that happened.
Yes. I go downstairs with my son, and there's another right before I even get down there. He's calling me names because I've forgotten the orange juice. I go over and show him I've got the orange juice. My son is throwing a tantrum. He thinks there's no juice, and we sit down, and my daughter comes down, and the three of us just sit, and we have our oatmeal together, and we're talking about the birds outside, and he's just in a huff, seeing how peaceful the kids and I are together. And
Mhm.
he kind of goes down to his basement where he works from home and leaves us be. And that is the first time that in my head I thought to myself, should I be getting us out of here? So that was that was an important day for me. It was not the day I left. It should have been. I should have left long before that,
Yeah.
but it was an important threshold that I crossed mentally that day,
Yeah.
because I did know that physical abuse is not okay. I knew my children should not be in a home with it. I knew that I didn't grow up in a home with it, and I knew as a black and white issue that was not okay.
Yeah. I like how you put it that way, black and white issue, because as you stated before, um, emotional verbal abuse wasn't seen as abuse,
Yes.
especially, as we're talking back in history, and I know it's not that long ago, but people didn't talk about this stuff. And so, first off, they're not talking about it, and now you're like, hey, but I'm not being abused because there's no bruises on me. I'm fine. Whereas we all know that that's not the truth. But now, yeah, now there is that definitive moment, and you're like,
Yes.
this is now physical. This is, and my children are there, right? So that's
Yeah.
very definitive moment. Um, so, and he started being a doomsday prepper.
Oh yeah, that happened. It happened slowly. It happened
Mm-hmm.
slowly and a little bit behind my back. But yes, he started to change his view of the world, and he was very locked in on the economy because of his job and trying to predict sort of
Mm-hmm.
what was going to happen financially for his clients. And in doing so, he got really locked in on these websites. He was reading Alex Jones, he was reading Jeff Rentz, And it was a lot of daily conspiracy theories. Now, I want to say that back during this time, it was harder to tell what is kind of a junk website and what is a professional website, right?
Yeah.
Even back then, if you were to do your taxes on a website, it might look really unprofessional. It was new. The
Yes.
internet was still fairly new.
Yeah.
And so these websites to me looked pretty junky, right? But there wasn't that discernment. And he was really buying into these things, and I'm sure people still do.
Oh, for
Actually,
sure.
actually, it's more widespread now to buy
I
into
think
that
so.
thinking than it ever used to be. But he was getting really into that and going down this spiral with that, and starting to believe that Armageddon was imminent. And
Hmm.
he wasn't really forthcoming with me about it. It was little things. Let's do this in case we attack Iran. If we attack
Hmm.
Iran, we might be worried about these things. These are just precautions. But what was happening behind my back is that he believed for certain these things were imminent, that society was going to break apart, and that he and I, maybe within any timeline between 2 months and 2 years, might be off living off the land
Hmm.
like pioneers or something. And he wasn't spelling that out to me.
Yeah.
It was a gray area. So he was ordering things, that looked like camping gear and things like that. And I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of all of it because it was getting whisked down to the basement,
Yeah.
put under the
And he was
stairs.
in control of the finances, so.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll fast forward a little bit again. And what was the actual final defining moment where you're like, we are out?
So this is a really, really important day in my life, probably one of the most important. So on a day in my life, both of my children told me what I had not told myself for certain, that I needed to go. In the morning, I was upstairs rocking in a chair up in the loft. Now I worked,
Your crying
I was
chair.
the sad chair. Yes. So my son was up there. I would go up there anytime Alec would scream at me, which was anytime the markets were down, anytime things weren't going his way, I would be getting screamed at. Well, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and he's working from home. So he's in the basement. So I'm going up to the second level anytime
Okay.
this happens so I can be as far away as possible. And what would happen
Hmm.
is my son would have all of his toys in his play area around there, and I would be rocking back and forth in this chair crying, or just being very sad. But also my son was young enough at the time when I started this habit that he wasn't really noticing. Well, this particular day, he handed me a plate with some fake food on it, from his play kitchen, and a sob escaped, and he noticed it, and he looked up at me, and he had this realization, and he ran into the bathroom and tore off a square of toilet paper and brought it
Yeah.
into me and climbed on my lap and was wiping my face, and, "Are you okay, mommy? Are you okay?" And he said, "Mommy, why do you cry in your sad chair so much? Is it because my daddy always yells at you?" And I thought, oh, he does see it. And so I that was the first kind of harsh realization for me. Oh, he does see it, because I was living in a land where my children, the most important thing is to keep this family intact for these children. I'm doing them a service. I don't
Yeah.
want them to live through divorce, and they love this man, and he's good to them, not to
Mm.
me. So that was the first realization, is that my youngest child is even aware of this. And then that same day we went to pick up my daughter. And as we were coming home, I took a call from Alec, and he was screaming at me, just blood, just chilling statements, saying really harsh things to me. I was very upset. I got off the phone, and as we were driving and pulling in to my subdivision, my daughter said to me, "Mommy, I have a great idea. I'm going to go in and I'll act really cute so that my dad won't be mean to you." And that was when the click happened. I knew, okay, I know what happens to little girls who grow up in a home like this. This starts to
Yeah.
feel like home to them. So not only do I know now that my youngest child is aware of it, my daughter is taking it in, and she's learning to maneuver around it to try and help me. Um, and I'm just thinking, okay, this is sealing her fate. And what I do now is going to seal her fate one way or another. And I was so broken down, and I was so against the idea of leaving, the idea of turning our lives upside down, going back to work and not being the stay at home mom that I had wanted to be for my children, changing my children's lives in any way. And I was still against all of those things. But once I process the thought, this is wrong for my children to be exposed to this, it never left me again. I never felt uncertainty about that again. I knew what I had to do. I just thought everything else was going to be a mess and would be ruined, but I knew I had to do that piece for them. And
Yes.
so that was the day that I left. There was another argument that evening, and I finally just said, this is it. This is it. You're going to go to counseling and we're going to get you help, or I'm going to call a divorce attorney. And that evening was our last night together living in the same home.
Yeah. So, as you are going through the separation, this divorce, I know that he continued berating you. He continued doing horrible things in front of the kids. And how long was it between when you divorced to when it was like, no, you're not seeing the kids anymore?
The final time, so that would have been, let's see, if we divorced in 20, we divorced I left in 2010, like early to mid spring of 2010. And I think it would have been Christmas Eve of 2011. So a good year and a half that we went on this way with regular visitation where he was seeing them. And then, some things started to happen and I would say, okay, we'll take a break from him. And now I'll put the kids back with him with this stipulation and this stipulation. And we tried those things for quite a while until I finally said no more.
Which was fantastic. Um, so once you finally said no more, and you had met your now husband.
Yes, yes,
Yes. He sounds like a fantastic guy, by the way.
he is.
How long was it between when he was no longer seeing them to when you got that phone call from the sheriff's department?
So let's see, the last time they had seen him was in December of 2011. That was the last time we have laid eyes on him. And I believe it was August of 2014. So not
Okay.
quite 3 years. So about 2.5 years since we had kind of lost his whereabouts. I would receive emails from him all scathing. The verbal abuse got much worse
Hmm.
without me in the home. And I think his perception of the world around him had gotten much worse, obviously, because
Yes,
of
because
what
he was now off the grid, living
off the
kind
grid.
of that life.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So that was about 2.5 years that he just continued to spiral down without us there to see it. So I wasn't really aware. I mean, I knew that the emails were still concerning. They were very much laced with crazy conspiracy theories that
Hmm.
some planet is going to come into orbit and there's going to be a fault at the New Madrid line and it's going to kill almost everyone we know. And I would get
Oh
these
my gosh.
emails, charter a plane, Emma Jean, and just, uh, things like that. So that was interesting.
Right? It definitely sounds like it. So I mean, we've heard all of these horrible things that you've endured. And obviously you went to therapy, you said that. What are some things that have helped you cope with this?
Well, the time away from the abuse, the time away from the mental programming, that really is something that just kind of unraveled over time and being in a healthy relationship. It took me some time to understand that I wasn't going to be in trouble for things that weren't my fault. If I broke a glass, I wasn't going to be verbally abused, that nothing about my physical appearance was ever going to come under attack. It just took time, learning to trust because of not being abused. That took years. And then being in therapy and talking about it in therapy. Although I will tell you that in my first years of therapy, and I was in regular therapy for about 7 years, all I was talking about was my kids and worrying about my kids and my hypervigilance towards my kids and my kids' lives. And this person was upsetting to my kid because I had really went right from rescuing us from that situation to believing that my whole life had to be making up for it for my kids to make sure they had no pain. And that was what my work in therapy was. I did therapy to get past that programming. I also do acupuncture,
Okay.
which is not something I expected to be so impactful on me, but it has been. I found it by accident. The first time I did it, it was in a yoga class, and I was just trying to support the yoga instructor. It was a yoga and acupuncture class, and they just did some real
Oh.
simple points when we were in shavasana at the end. And I felt this emotional upheaval where I was just crying suddenly. My brain was going on this tour of all these things that were upsetting for me. And so I looked into acupuncture and learned it takes you out of fight or flight mode. And so then you can kind of unravel and work on the things that you're holding in. And so I started
Okay.
doing regular acupuncture. That really helped me to unravel that programming,
Hmm.
and to trust again. And really just removing that from my life over time, um, learning that I don't have to look over my shoulder.
Hmm. Right. And that's huge because like you said, you've got this hypervigilance going because of all this learned behavior and being a mom, you want to make sure that your kids are okay. Like, but they also have to make their own mistakes and things like that. To a degree, of course.
Of course, of course, of course. And that's something that took me a long time to learn. I really was um, extreme in my hypervigilance towards my kids. I believed that they had already had enough for a lifetime. Of
Hmm.
they had all their tokens were used for hard things, and they were pretty young. It was not
Hmm.
realistic that they were going to go through all these years unscathed, and so that was really hard for me to
Yeah,
learn that.
for sure. Um, so now the kids are off to college. How many are off to
Hmm.
college?
Well, my blended family is 5 kids.
Yes.
So we've got next in August we will have 4 kids in college and one who has graduated. Actually, one's going into medical school. 3 will be in undergrad.
Oh
So
my gosh.
yeah, yeah.
That's
So
crazy. And I mean, I want to make sure everybody knows that there is hope afterwards. Um, your husband was able to officially adopt yours.
yes, yes, he did a step parent adoption. It was really important. I didn't know about step parent adoptions. I always thought that my battle was going to be having Alex's rights taken away, and I was very much reluctant to poke the bear
Hmm.
legally with him because this is somebody who has nothing to lose at this point, right? He's
Yeah.
not seeing us. He had lost his job, he had lost his license, he was living off the land, and I was reluctant to do anything to incite him to kind of come after us. But what I had learned is that you can do a step parent adoption, and that in my state anyway was the easiest way to create a termination of parental rights from my ex-husband. And so we went through that whole process. It was several months of a process. And fortunately, Alec had been shooting at his neighbors during the time when those papers were served. And so he was unable to come out and contest and show up at these court dates.
Yeah. Which, great. Thank you. Right?
Yes,
Like,
yes.
so sorry that you were shooting at people, but nobody got hurt, right?
Nobody got hurt. I
Okay.
think there was some damage to some cars. He was shooting on at the county road at anybody who passed by on his county road. He had begun to
Hmm.
believe that the county road belonged to him, which led us to believe that he probably, being so isolated, thought the apocalypse had come and that he was
Hmm.
just, protecting his land, protecting all of this doomsday stuff he had stashed out there. This is
Hmm.
what he had been waiting for, except that wasn't actually
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
And so, no, he did not hurt anyone. I know in some of the articles I read that he had shot over a police car when they went by. He
Oh.
had shot thousands of rounds from these
Hmm.
semi-automatic weapons at cars, at people passing by. He had damaged some cars, and I think some tree branches had fallen on people. And people were
Hmm.
getting to the point. This is in a really rural area that they were telling the police we're going to start shooting back. And
Yeah.
so the police had a really scary thing ahead of them on their hands if they didn't intervene.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. So, but at least, things worked out well for you
Yes,
guys in the
yes.
end. Um, I had a thought, and then so as I was reading your book, there was two things that kept popping into my head. So at the beginning of the book, I'm like, he's a narcissist, and then as you're talking about how he's changing into this paranoid and delusion, I'm like, is he schizophrenic? Right? Like, and we don't really need to know. That's not important. But that was kind of my thought process because I'm nosy that way.
It's
And I'm
it's yeah,
right.
it's the $1 million question with him because as I had said, I never was able to get him to sit in front of anybody because the very thing that was
Exactly.
ailing him, that paranoia, prevented him from wanting to go and sit in front of a counselor or even go to a doctor because he believed he would be put
Exactly.
on a list a government list, and that maybe this one day would land him in an internment camp. I will tell you this: do I see the signs of narcissism in the very beginning? Yes, I think he was love bombing me. I don't
Yeah.
think I'm not somebody who thinks everyone is a narcissist. A lot of grandiose language.
Hmm.
In the beginning, he would kind of hold court with his fraternity brothers, and they really wanted to please him and be intellectual like him, and they really weren't. And so what would happen is they would try and keep up and try and be philosophical with them, and he would say things like, hurry, hurry, you're boring me.
Mm.
Very kind of grandiose, almost like guru
Yeah.
type of language. And we would see a lot of that with him. I do think, here's what I sometimes think. I don't think that the mental illness that happened later on after we were married was the same as the problems I was seeing in the beginning. And as
Yeah.
you know, a lot of mental health conditions can be comorbid. So I think maybe in the
Exactly.
beginning we had this personality disorder, and if it had only been that, I think maybe I would have ended up in a very tumultuous marriage, with a narcissist. Maybe I would have gotten divorced. Maybe I wouldn't have.
Hmm.
I think it would have been kind of a regular story of a toxic marriage. But then I think when he started to self medicate at some point, maybe it was the onset of this other thing. We
Hmm.
don't know. Was it bipolar with psychosis? I've heard people speculate that. I have heard
Yeah.
people speculate schizophrenia, but obviously he's not in front of us and we can't tell.
Oh, for
Whatever was
sure.
the onset of that, I believe he started to self medicate a lot. And I
Hmm.
have become aware just recently that there is such a thing as cannabis induced schizophrenia.
Yes.
I had no idea, and it's something that's important for my kids to know. I mean,
Yeah.
it's legal now, and that's fine. And I have a lot of friends who benefit from it and enjoy using it. If you have I think if you have a predisposition through your genetics, you should probably read a little bit about um, how cannabis and how narcotics and abuse of any drug really
Yeah.
can possibly send you into that slippery slope that lifts this in, exposes the snake under the
Yes.
rock. And I think that's what happened with him.
Hmm.
I don't know which of those. I don't know if it's bipolar disorder. I do know
Yeah.
there's some psychosis going on there.
Yeah, exactly. Because I just remember reading it, and there is definitely a switch from
Hmm.
what I know of as narcissism,
Yes.
um, to something. I don't want to say more severe because narcissists can be very severe on their own, but to a different disorder,
Yes.
or like you said, a comorbid disorder. There was definitely a trigger or switch, something that changed, and something more happened.
Yes.
Um, that's definitely how I read it. I'm like, hmm, interesting. Like it was just interesting. Um,
It
so
was very
yeah,
complex, a very complex,
mm-hmm,
and it was confusing for me, right? Because
for
I knew
sure.
in the beginning these are just like kind of jerk behaviors that he has. And then it became, is this just an increased version of that? What is this? And also, he's gaslighting me every conversation.
Yeah.
He's really intelligent. It was really hard to argue with him. Even when he was going on about his conspiracies, he knew more about history. He knew more about politics. He knew more
Mm-hmm.
about science. I mean, I was a creative girl who was into
Right.
writing and English and books. I didn't have a full body of knowledge to argue back with him. So it was really easy to push me back into my corner in these arguments. And that helped me kind of sustain that life for a longer time.
Yeah. So, what would you say to somebody? What would be your piece of wisdom for somebody who is maybe in a relationship that they're just now starting to realize there's a whole bunch of red flags?
My first piece of advice is to talk to your friends and family, because that's something I wasn't doing. And I needed to see the reaction on their faces when I told them the truth, not the concocted version of what was going on. But when I
Mm-hmm.
said to them, this is what I'm being called in my home, this is what's happening, these are the things, the theories that my husband has. When I saw their faces, I understood for the first time, this isn't normal. This isn't
Yeah.
happening in everybody else's home. So talk to your friends, talk to your family, get opinions from people. Don't hide what's happening, because you need an outside perspective to have a well-rounded perspective. And the other advice I would give is that it is never a good day to turn your life upside down. And I am not suggesting that everybody in a bad relationship should leave, but if you're pretty sure you should and you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you need to have faith that it is there. Because for me, the light at the end of the tunnel was a pinhole. I didn't
Yeah.
really believe my life. I thought my life was over and I was saving my kids. My life now is so much better than I ever imagined, and it took time to get there. And I wish I had known how great it could be, but it was hard to have faith. And so I think you've got to have faith in that light at the end of the tunnel, even when you can't see it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I mean, obviously we've talked about your book because your book is your story, but what is the name of it? Is there any other details that you need to share about it?
My book is When Things Collapse
Ta-da!
by Jean Rowin, and it's available on Amazon. It's on Kindle, and it's also available in a paperback. And I would love for you to check it out because most importantly, I really want it to get into the hands of the right people who need the story.
For sure. And like I said, guys, the review is coming and it is a glowing review. And if you think that we just covered everything in the book, you're wrong.
There's so much more. We could talk for days and days, and there's so much more
Right.
that is shocking. And um, it's a heck of a story, and it is
Yeah.
my story. And sometimes even I can't believe some of the things that happened.
Right? Exactly. But we definitely just tip of the iceberg, even though we just talked for almost an hour about these things. Yeah, guys, read the book. There's a lot more in it. Because I definitely don't want to have you tell every little thing. Plus, like you
Sure.
said, that'd be days long. But there's so much more in it, and I think that you very eloquently explained the emotional up and down of, do I leave? Do I not leave? I'm not abused, but I am abused. My kids, like all of that, I think was really well done.
Thank
Um,
you.
but the review is coming, so.
Thank you. I can't wait. I appreciate it. I appreciate your review, and I appreciate you taking the time to read it.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah. Where do people follow you?
You can follow me on Instagram or TikTok at Jean Rowin.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on, sharing with us all the things. So you hang tight there while we say goodbye.
Okay, thanks for having me.
As always, thank you so much for the amazing guests that we have on the show. Be sure to check out their links down in the description below. If you want to support the channel, go ahead and check out our merch store. We've got some very cool things on there. That's my favorite. Sorry, I'm busy ending the stigma. But there's some other very cool designs. 10% of the proceeds always goes back to the Canadian Mental Health Association. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at RB Media because we have some great new shows coming up and you never want to miss any of those episodes. And remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. Bye! Excellent. Okay, so we just have to wait for it to finish uploading, which is, oh, look at that. So fast. It's already done. I love that.
Okay.
So yeah, we were live, so this is on YouTube and stuff, but I have to go in and like make the description and all that fun stuff.
Okay.
So once I do that, I don't know if it'll be tonight. Probably might be tomorrow. But once I do all of that, I'll send you the links. I'll update the pod match and hit complete and all that fun stuff.